How's it going today, guys? Today we're going to be doing a top end on my Grom. This motor is the 2014 through 2024 speed motor. It is out of a 2018 SF Grom. The only difference that there's going to be on this versus the original Grom motor is said that the crankshafts are a little bit stronger on the 14-15 motors, and the clutch cover is ever so slightly different. So on the older Groms, you're going to have the dipstick back up over here. On the newer ones, it's right here. Other than that, this process is exactly the same for rebuilding the Grom. I'm not even going to touch this. I recently did an oil change, but it's burning oil pretty bad. So I got new rings, new gaskets. We're going to put them in and hope to fix the issue. Alright, so to start this process, first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to remove this cap, I'm going to remove that cap, I'm going to remove this cover so we can make sure we're in time. Since I'm not changing the oil, if you leave it on the kickstand, it will drop oil out of this cap. So I have mine leaned up right now just so I can get it in time. And I'm just going to hand tighten this cap back on just to make sure that no oil comes out, and then I can work on everything else freely. Alright, there we go. Cover's off. So the first thing we're going to start by doing, so if you take a look, you see that little dot right there. That needs to line up with that little point right there. Now, when doing that, in here, there's a little sight glass. There's going to be an F and a T. You want to get the T lined up. There's a little line, it's kind of hard to see, right there that you got to line it up with. You're going to turn the motor counterclockwise when you do it, and if you pass it, you just spin around again. One thing I should add is it is a 17 millimeter. There we go. So now I have the T mark in there. Hopefully that's visible. And the dot is perfectly lined up. So I'm gonna hand screw this cap back in. Just so I don't leak oil, I can set it back down. Then the next thing we're going to end up doing is I'm going to unbolt this exhaust. I'm going to unbolt the intake manifold. Alright, for the exhausts, your factory nuts will be a both 12 millimeters. You're just going to loosen them all the way. Alright, so once those nuts are off, I got those springs on there, but this will just fall right down, this clamp. And then the exhaust, wiggle it around a little bit. I might have to unbolt it off the frame too. There is a bolt right there under the frame, which it looks like that's what I'm gonna have to remove next so I can get this exhaust to drop down. And just like that, exhaust is loose. So next, get off the intake manifold. So factory ones, there will be a little 8 millimeter, right, that goes in right there, and then there's a little cover on here. I have mine removed for my idle adjuster, and then your stock air box will also kind of be in the way. There'll be a little metal bracket that goes beneath this bolt that I have missing out of there, then also this bolt. The only difference you're going to have in this whole process is having that bracket there. That bolt does not need to come out, just this one does. They're both 10 millimeters, and I personally like to do it with a wrench rather than a ratchet, as ratchets don't really fit in there well. So I have my nice little gear wrench, makes this whole process way easier. Alright, now that both of those bolts are out, next thing we're going to do, this intake will go loose. If you have the stock air box, it won't move as easily, but it'll still move around. So you're going to pick it up a little bit, and underneath of it, you're going to have this little guy. You're just going to slide that out, and we'll talk about putting it back in. It goes back in. This little rubber gasket falls out right here. All you gotta do is just push it back in. There's no certain order it goes. It just helps keep it sealed so when the air is moving through the intake. Alright, so the next thing we're gonna do, We're gonna unplug this sensor right here. Normally there's a little clip that plug goes in right there. You'll need pliers to remove, just any sort of needle nose or anything. And it just presses in, pulls out. On this side, you're gonna unplug this sensor right here. And normally it runs up, it goes back here, and it sits right up in this area. Sometimes you can get it without removing the plastics. It's easy to remove the plastics. Mine's rerouted around to the other side, and then it's just a little clip that plugs in. Then this whole wire will pull down with your head, and it's way easier than trying to get that sensor out of there. And then pull off the spark plug wire. That's all you gotta unplug for everything. So you can see what that wire plug looks like. It'll look just like this on the other side. And then the next thing we're gonna do is pull that bolt right there. I always use an impact to pull it. It's way easier. To get it without an impact, you're gonna have to find some way to hold with these holes, and then you'll just loosen it like normal. With an impact, you'll just set it on here and loosens right out. If you're worried about timing, an easy way to keep it in time, if you get a small zip tie, just go through that hole and around the sprocket, just tighten it nice and tight to that chain. You can just keep the cam gear in there, and then you don't have to retime it. Timing it's not hard at all. You just have to line up dot, T, and that's all there is to it. But, so once you get that bolt off, you just need to kind of wiggle gear, pop right out, and then to get it out of your way, just kind of spin the chain off the outsides, then you can pull it out. All right, so next, you're gonna remove these two 8mm bolts right here. As soon as you get those out, you're gonna remove the 4 bolts up on the head. One thing to make note of, make sure you have all 4 of these little washers. Once you have those 4 bolts off, this whole head will be loose, should be able to pull off. There we go. Alright, all that's left before pulling the jug off is we're going to take out that bolt and pull out the little rubber roller that's inside of there. Make note, there is a little washer on this bolt too. See if we can get it separated right there. So in order to pull this off, once those are all undone, you're just gonna kind of wiggle it and pull. Should come off pretty easily. And then there's that rubber roller. So once it's off, one thing to make note of is this is gonna be the side that faces towards the front of the motorcycle. There is a spacer right here and a spacer right here. The other one is in my head right now. Make sure you do not lose those. And then on this side, this is gonna be the back side that's towards the back of the motor. You're gonna have one right here and right here. You do not wanna lose those. Those are what keep the whole top end in place while on top of being bolted on. Most times when you're rebuilding those, you're just gonna replace a cylinder. But if you plan on reusing it, examine the inside for storing. I have a small amount right there, but I don't think it's enough that it should be burning oil, not to the extent that it is. It's not all the way through, so we're gonna reuse it. All right, so normally your next step from here would be to remove the piston, but in my case, I'm reusing the piston. Yeah, my piston looks perfectly fine. I am just doing new rings. So in order to normally remove the piston, let me get this up close. You're gonna see there's a little notch here, and there's a little C-clip in there. The best way to do it is a tiny little flathead, needle nose pliers, whatever. You gotta pry that out, then snap that out. You only need to take out one side, and then there's a little wrist pin in here. You'll be able to just push on it from whatever side you didn't pull the clip on. It should slide right out. If your piston does not move nice and free like this, if it locks up to the point you literally can't turn it, you're gonna need a bottom end rebuild. It won't just be the top end. I have dealt with that several times, and at that point, the easiest thing to usually do is buy a new motor. And when you're installing the piston, you're just gonna get those snapped into place. You'll know when they're snapped in. It'll sit in there fully, it'll click down, and it'll be perfect. And I guess one thing I should add, so when these haven't been rebuilt, this motor's obviously been rebuilt before, but the gasket over there, so there's some left over there. The rest is all on my cylinder yet. You're gonna want to use some sort of scraper, scrape it off. You can do it with a razor blade. I don't recommend it. I have a scraper that uses a razor blade, get it at O'Reilly's, and this helps keep it flat. I can get force behind it, and I think it works great. There we go. Gasket's all cleaned off on there. There we go, just like that. Got a nice clean surface. So I'll set that down. Get the rings pulled off on the piston. Alright, so I got brand new OEM Honda rings and gaskets. I bought them local from my dealership, as that is typically the cheapest place to get them. And as you can see, got all of our rings in here. So as far as the piston ring order goes, if you go OEM, you're gonna have this silver one, and you're gonna have this black one. The silver one has a little R marking on it right there, and the black one has a little like RS, it looks like. This is gonna be your second ring. If you're not using OEM and you want to be able to tell how these go, if you put them over each other, overlap them, it's gonna be hard to show this in video, but the second ring, so your bottom of the two, will be just a little bit thicker, like going on this flat surface here. It'll be just a little bit thicker. And when you install these, going OEM Honda, you want to make sure that the letters are facing upwards towards the front of the motor when you put them in. As far as the bottom rings go, the oiling rings, they are the very small ones, very thin. There's no lettering on them. You can put these in whichever way you'd like to. And then this piece will go right in the center. I do know when you put everything in, make sure that you put plenty of oil on the rings, and make sure you put plenty of oil in the cylinder. Alright, so I got my rings all in, I got them all lined up. I'm going to post the picture of how to line them up because it'll be a lot easier than showing on here. So the next thing that you're going to do, once you get your piston in, you get your rings in. You're going to take your new gasket and you're going to stick it on here. It'll be the paper one, it will only fit one direction. Once you have that gasket on, you're going to take your cylinder and you're going to take some oil, put it around the insides. So when putting the piston in, I don't use a compressor. How I do it, I just set it in there so the very tip of the piston is in. Make sure it's a good angle. The very tip of the piston's in, and then these rings, you're very gentle. You can just kind of work it in, but by hand. Then, just like that, the cylinder is back on. Once you get the cylinder back on, you're going to put this bolt back through, make sure you have the copper washer on it, and you're going to put this back on. It goes through this. This can go on either direction. Alright, so once you have that head slid back on, next thing I'm going to do is put these 4 head bolts back on, tighten them down. My experience with Groms, every single time I torque bolts down to factory spec, I usually end up snapping the bolt. These I do not think you would snap, but I have had such bad luck with it that I prefer just to go nice and snug on them. Make sure when you're tightening the head that you go crisscross, so corner, 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 corner. And once you get those 4 on, you can put these in. Alright, so as far as putting the cam gear on, you need to get this back off. So when you put the cam gear back on, you want to make sure you are still in time. And the easiest way to do it, if you remove this tilted bolt, make sure the spring and everything in there goes back in place. It's going to pop out of spring, it'll shoot out at you. But that bolt, even if you just loosen it a little bit, will reduce tension so then the chain has more room to move. There is a little notch that is in your crankshaft. It's gonna be kind of hard to tell, but that little piece, that singled piece right on there, that'll slide into that notch. I'm gonna do this without reducing the tension. I'm gonna get this set over, get that little gear lined up. I'm gonna take a big flathead and just pry her forward just enough. Just like that. It's on, it's in place. And that will not move. As far as tightening it, goes the same way as loosening it. Don't want it to go too tight so you don't break it. But verify once you get that done, your mark up here lines up perfectly and it is perfectly on teeth. If you are a tooth off, it's either gonna run wrong or it won't run at all. Next, so we clean this cover back on. Next, I'm gonna put this back in under the intake. So there are two little dots here, and those are gonna hold it into place when you put it in. So the further up one will be on the right side, and the further back one will be on the left side. Next thing you'll do, get the exhaust back on. Last but not least, you're just gonna plug everything back in. Gonna plug that sensor in, plug it back in. Last thing you'll do, that back in. Finally, there we go, we're back up and running. You're gonna let it fully heat cycle, turn it off, heat cycle it again, turn it off, and then after that, you should be good to ride. Take it easy on your first few hundred miles, and you won't have an issue. Hope you enjoyed the video, and there will be more to come.